Code breakers. The Germans used a secret code called Enigma to send messages. Then the British Navy captured a U-boat and found items that helped the British to break the code and work out where U-boats were. Daisy will now tell us about work at Bletchley Park.
My great-grandma, Peggy Poupard, worked at Bletchley Park. Bletchley Park is where the British broke the secret codes used by the Germans. The Enigma machine was used by the Germans to send codes between their armies. Bletchley Park had a captured Enigma machine which was used to read the codes and send fake ones back to the Germans. The man responsible for breaking the codes was called Alan Turing. He developed the first programmable digital computer called Colossus to help break the codes. It is believed the breaking of the Enigma codes shortened World War II by about 2 to 4 years. People who worked at Bletchley Park signed the official secret act and never spoke about their work there, including my great-grandma, Peggy Poupard.
WAF. The WAF, also known as the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, was the female auxiliary of Royal Air Force. It was established on June 28, 1939. The ATS, Auxiliary Territorial Service, helped in the Second World War. Some of the women to do it got very little training and no uniform and worked as cooks, clerks and shopkeepers. During the course of this war, women started to go to work as telephonists, drivers, butchers, bakers, ammunition inspectors and military police. They took over some of the tasks performed by the male crew. This included finding enemy aircrafts and operating searchlights. They never got to fire the guns, and around 355 women died during the World War. My great-great-auntie Pat, who is still alive, was born in 1925 and was in the ATS for the Second World War. In October 1944, when Pat was 18, she joined the ATS, although she was still very young, and she did this because she felt that she needed to see more of the world and help in the war effort. Firstly, she had 6 weeks basic training at Guildford, after which there was a selection for private training. Pat then went to a driving school which had army schoolhouse in the ground of her house. Also, Queen Elizabeth II then went there after her. Pat was then moved to Candover, near Shrewsbury. Members of the REME, Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, would help if somebody had a breakdown, and when they were driving the vehicles around, Pat had to drive vehicles from jeeps to 3-ton trucks to the docks. One day, as you might have guessed, Pat broke down in the Mersey Tunnel. This was because somebody, not Pat, had miscalculated the amount of petrol needed. Petrol was rationed, so they didn't put any more than what was needed in the vehicle. She was charged but not punished. Once the war ended, she got promoted.
Capture and escape. Soldiers who were captured by the enemy became prisoners of war, POWs. They were sent to prisoners called POW camps. Many POWs tried to escape and get back home. This was a great risk because if they were caught, they could be killed. Escaping. The rules of the British forces said that all captured officers should try to escape.
Donald McGrath. My great-grandfather, Donald McGrath, was born on 20th of June 1898 and went to Bombsgrove School. He finished his schooling at Birmingham University Medical School. He was in both World Wars, and in the Second World War he was an RAF medical squadron leader. In 1940, Donald was made responsible for the health of a barrage balloon cruise from Portsmouth to Havre West. A barrage balloon floated over a certain area prevented the enemy from dropping bombs from directly overhead. But in 1941, Donald was sent to Singapore. He was then captured and sent to Wakayama prison camp on the main island of Honshu, where the prisoners were made to work in a neighbouring factory. The only food they had was rice and the only nutrients from the maggots. Soon exhausted men had to be carried back. 2 or 3 people were dying weekly. Donald made a case for lighter work for sick men, and eventually his wish was granted. A fellow prisoner of war said his genuine care for others had a steadying effect upon all. Dr. McGrath was good and courageous. Donald was awarded an OBE for his selfless and unstinting work whilst a prisoner of war. He retired in Poole, Dorset, with his wife Isabella and their 2 children. He died in 1987.
My great-great-grandfather was born on February the 28th, 1902. When he was 15 years old, he was a drummer boy. 3 years later, he joined the adult army and came out when he was 33 years old in 1935. At the start of the war, he was called out to serve in the army in France. Once, he was keeping guard of a prison cell there, and he was almost deaf, so he let the prisoners slip away. Soon, he was called to train the 18-year-olds. He did this until the end of the war in 1945, when he was demobbed. He then died in 1982.
Frank Stanley Sherman. At the start of the Second World War, the British Army had 36,000 men guarding the Suez Canal and the valuable oil fields. The Suez Canal was important because it linked the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian Ocean. In September 1940, the Italian army invaded Egypt from Libya and fought against the British, causing many casualties. Frank was my great-granddad. When he was about to finish being a soldier, the army needed him, so he stayed until the war had finished. He was also promoted. He was fighting in Egypt and the Middle East. The Germans and English were fighting over Egypt. The Germans got too close and Frank was captured. He was taken to an Italian prison camp. The people who were captured, as well as him, were only supplied with very little food and water. Frank was then moved to a German prison camp. One day, the Red Cross flew over and dropped supplies for the prisoners. They got tinned food, cigarettes, chocolate, and a few other bits. Frank was given cigarettes and traded them to the Germans for chocolates. He was in prison for several years. At last, he was rescued by the Americans. From 1915 to 1998, he got to 83 years old.
So we're going to have binging.
Captain W.D.G. Watkins, my great-grandfather's devotion to duty was quite remarkable, earning 3 gallantry awards and a mention in dispatches during 4 tours of frontline duty, as well as numerous sorties whilst involved in training command. Some of his squadron contemporaries have told that they were in awe of him, not least because he was an observer in command of a bomber squadron. The sole survivor of the loss of his Lancaster, it has been reported that he was tortured on the way to prison camp and that he survived an attempt to assassinate him when the POW camp Stalag Luft 1 Bath was about to be relieved. On release, he was presented with well-wishing cartoons from many of his fellow prisoners. By early 1947, my great-grandfather had logged an incredible 600-plus operational and over 400 passenger hours, and his 4 wartime tours would equate to approximately 120 bombing operations.
Battle in the Sky. Hitler planned to invade Britain to make this easier. He sent the Luftwaffe to destroy Britain's Royal Air Force, the RAF. First, the RAF and the Luftwaffe fought each other in the Battle of Britain. The RAF managed to win just afterwards. Hitler started to bomb British cities heavily. This campaign was known as the Blitz. The Blitz, between 1940 to 1941, the Luftwaffe bombed many British cities every night. Thousands of people were killed or injured in these air raid alerts. When enemy bombers were on the way, the wailing sirens warned everyone. People rushed to hide in underground air raid shelters until they had an all-clear siren.
Bomb Story, Manchester 1942 by Marjorie Lee.
Marjorie Lee worked in education in Manchester. Her wartime duties included helping evacuee children and involvement in food planning.
Bomb Story by Marjorie Lee. For a year we lived like troglodytes, then a landmine, a near miss, blew in the cellar door. It flattened my mother's camp bed. She rolled onto the next one and murmured, "How noisy," and slept peacefully on.
The rectangle of the skeleton doorway framed the crimson furnace, the city on fire, under the lowering weight of an endless heavy roar of the bombers circling, theirs of course, and over that, the booming racket of the attack guns, ours, thank heaven.
Our neighbour descended 2 floors in her bed, unhurt. 2 others were buried. Another, away for the night, rushed home and found it a seeming ruin. Her mother's Chippendale sideboard, a few charred fragments, was what caused her abandon to helpless tears.
Our windows were all shattered, every one. The curtains shredded into long vertical strips, like the tattered colour of the regiment after honourable battle.
Our neighbour's garden had a crater that would hold 2 buses.
He said the rich soil thrown up was most productive, and round the perimeter grew excellent lettuces the next spring of the war.
Meanwhile, his wife's lace corsets and mended red jumper hung 40 feet up in an elm whose leaves were scorched off.
Next morning, a Pompeian pool of dust and smoke loomed over all, with hosepipe snaking slyly in black mud across the thoroughfares. One arrayed spray trespassing into our 2 open windows.
Unkindly moistened our national bread and marge, our air-sapped coffee and soya porridge, and straw pale tea.
But everywhere you could hear the cheerful tinkling of broken glass as housewives swept it up into neat heaps on the garden paths. One bemoaning her Persian carpet ruin, another the grit on her drawing room settee.
But at 7 sharp, the milk was on the step.
And at 7:30, the newsboy came cycling, zigzagging among the firemen.
Whistling surprisingly in air from the nocturne of Chopin.
The most beautiful sound in the world.